Basically, I'll tell you straight out, I'm afraid. I don't want to go. I don't want to die.
I have friends there also. I want them to come back. I hear from them, and it's sad. Nobody should have to go through that, not even the people that we're fighting against.
I don't think that we can do anything about it except for just hope for the best.
This series is made out of material sent to us by people all over the country who are currently speaking out against the U.S. involvement in the Persian Gulf. Nationwide, people are raising questions, demanding information, organizing teach-ins, and finding out that they are a part of a major movement focused on peace in the Persian Gulf and the need to solve domestic problems. This first half hour of the Gulf Crisis TV project will look at the background of U.S. involvement in the region and will focus on the oil, economics, energy and security policies of the United States.
Because we are part of the international movement that is strong, that is old, that is courageous, that is committed to human survival with dignity, with justice, and with self-determination. Cambridge, Boston, Roxbury, Mattapan, and all the places from which we come belong to this wellspring of humanity. And when we leave from here today, one of the first and clearest messages we must take back to our homes and our communities is that we are the decision makers and the democratic force in crisis and in peacetime. And we represent, if there is world democracy, we are the voice of democracy.
Hell no, we won't go. We won't fight for Mexico. Hell no, we won't go. We won't fight for Mexico. Hell no, we won't go. We won't fight for Mexico.
Now is the time to reveal the absurdity of the military institution. Let us not only fight to prevent war, but also let us fight to find a way to demilitarize our society. If war breaks out, college students will not be exempt from the draft. My son will not go. He has filed for conscientious objection with NISCO. He says no to big business and its oil profits, and he says no to Wall Street. He says no to any war. I did not bring children into this world for this insanity.
The Persian Gulf has, for most of this century been sort of a main concern of the United States. the oil industry, the development of oil in the region is a 20th century phenomenon. By the end of World War II, you had the American and European oil companies well ensconced with their concession arrangements with the various states in the region, and you had, after World War II, the Middle East, the Persian Gulf area, sort of coming on stream as a major producer in the world oil market.
In American national policy, which is also linked and parallels American oil company policy, the world is essentially a reservoir, and countries and regions are looked at as a series of storage tanks. So in the Iran case, when people panicked and said, my God, what will we do now we're cut off from Iranian oil, the answer was nothing happened. They literally turned up the valves elsewhere, and most Americans never were aware that there was no longer Iranian oil on the world market.
This focus of the Persian Gulf is well illustrated in the record of the various doctrines of presidential doctrines of intervention, for instance. Every one of them has a focus on the Persian Gulf. The Truman Doctrine of 1947, for instance, it's, of course, was targeted on Turkey and Greece and the civil wars and communist versus anti-communist royalist factions going on there. But the whole rationale for it was because Turkey and Greece stood between the Soviet Union and the Persian Gulf. I mean, that was why there was a Marshall Plan in Turkey. That was why there was a Truman Doctrine. The Eisenhower Doctrine, 10 years later in 1957, again, was focused, mainly concerned about the Persian Gulf. And in fact, the one military intervention that was made under the Eisenhower Doctrine, when Marines were sent into Lebanon in 1958, the trigger of that, ironically enough, was the nationalist revolution in Iraq in July of 1958. So the landing of the Marines on the shores of Beirut had something to do with the civil war going on in Lebanon at the time, but it mainly was a staging area for possible intervention in Iraq if there was any possibility of launching a counter-revolution, which it turns out there wasn't.
I don't want to see body bags coming back to the United States over an aggressive posture in the Persian Gulf. It is not to defend democracy. It is to defend Texaco and Esso and Amoco and BNP and stuff. That's who they're defending.
On campus, we have been having since since September the 1st, we've been having petition tables and literature flyers passed out at every event. Every Friday we put out some sort of fact sheet on the Middle East situation. Our purpose is still to educate the student body at Southern University. Southern is a predominantly black institution of higher learning. We have right now, as of this date, there have been over 1,000 students that have had to leave, to withdraw from school or just drop out of their courses because they are gone. They have been called up. The last of them left out yesterday.
As we already know, all the oil companies own all the big coal companies. And we know what's been going on with the coal companies. How the oil companies is behind the coal companies trying to lay off people, cost jobs and all this and that. So we're going into this war, and what this war is supposed to be all about. It's not defending our country. It's defending for the oil companies, to make the oil companies richer.
One of the ways that give the oil companies tremendous clout is the recognition that their interests and the interests of the nation, of the government, and presumably of the American people are pretty much the same. And of course, this is justified by claiming that since oil is now the basic energy resource, if you take all of our energy forms, natural gas and oil, they still account for a good 65% of the energy base of industrial society, heavily controlled by major companies. And then increasingly, the oil companies control about half of the coal production, probably, so that they control a very high percentage of the energy. And of course, this is argued as basic national security.
We're the Delaware County Campaign for Peace in the Middle East, and we're here today because of BP's historic role in the Middle East. Ever since 1911, BP has been pumping $500 significant amount of oil from the Middle East region, from Iran and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. And as a matter of fact, the Kuwaiti government owns 10% of the BP stock. So we're here today to say that BP, with so much influence, should lend its voice to working for peace in the Middle East instead of war.
If you look at the decisions on the subject of energy over the years, there's a very definite, very deliberate pattern, and that pattern has, in effect, landed these troops in the Gulf. You don't even have to read between the lines. You can just listen to what Dick Cheney is saying and listen to what Bush is saying and listen to what some of the Republican leaders, the Minority Leader Bob Dole has been saying on the Senate floor. The reason these troops are there is oil. The second reason, they're talking about aggression and that kind of thing, but the reason that's always mentioned in tandem with that is energy security. And what's happened is that we've had an energy policy that has defined energy security as access to oil in the Middle East.
And in 1975, Secretary of State Kissinger argued that any time there was any interference or potential threat with American energy supplies now or in the future, presumably, that justified American intervention or precautionary measures, because otherwise the United States industrial system would be strangled. This strangulation theory led us, the United States government, to move to look to establish bases in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia.
Ain't gonna let that Chevron oil turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let Chevron oil turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, gonna build a brand new world. The poor, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, they are the ones that's going to be the brunt of this. So we must continue this and get them out of the Gulf. They have no business there.
Are you stuck between a rock and a hard place? It's too late for Kuwait. Time to stop drilling for oil and start killing for oil so we can keep spilling the oil. Iran, away from domestic problems, to feast on the Middle East. Now we can put the environment into retirement. Blame economic woes on Middle Eastern foes. Our weapons of destruction are safe from imminent reduction. Let's put the nation out of focus with aviation hocus pocus from our Navy's aircraft carriers, jets faster than sound barriers, buzzing over the ocean in patriotic devotion, poised to kill and die. They patrol the sky. It's oil that lets them fly. It's boring in Managua. We're done destroying Nicaragua. The Contras are passé, though they knew how to play. It's just too many ambiguities, like Ollie North's gratuities. And Panama's no fun. We grab the general and run. We put Noriega and Winnebago to keep Las Vegas safe from that traitor. And Cambodia's a mess. We just don't need the stress. Eastern Europe's finally free as MTV. So South Africa for sure, free as a PGA Golf Tour. The media paints a scene of a tyrant so unclean, but the oil companies think it's keen as they raise the price of gasoline. So with crystal clear vision, we turn on television and see scenes we like to see, like freedom and democracy. The flag flies high as Arabs die. And that's how it should be. After all, they're on our property.
Who anointed us to be the super cop of the universe?
I am very grateful for the support all of us here are receiving from the American people. The American people are with us. Congress is with us. Our allies are with us. And the vast majority of the Arab people are with us.
I mean, the Arab world politically is very deeply divided over this invasion, and particularly over the American intervention. But broadly speaking, at the popular level, there's a great deal of unhappiness with the American intervention, to put it mildly. There's a sense of, yeah, we're against the invasion of Kuwait. There's a sense of with Kuwait against Iraq, but with Iraq against the United States. And I think that has to do with this whole history of manipulation, that I was referring to. I mean, even if Americans don't remember Mossadegh in 1953, Arabs do. Iranians do. I mean, people living in the region know that for the time when Iran was the enemy in the 1950s and we were fighting Mossadegh, the oil companies were pumping all the oil they wanted out of Kuwait and Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Then in the 1960s, when the Shah was on the throne in Iran, and he was our big buddy, and Iraq was the nationalist force in the region, campaigning for higher oil prices and greater national control of its oil industry and so on. Then Iran and Kuwait were used to produce oil and keep Iraqi production down.
There is a system that is the countries that are members of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, agreed that each one of them should produce so many barrels of oil per day, and Kuwait's share was 1 million. Okay. So what happened, Kuwait was producing 1.5 million. And so when you produce more than your allotment, that means you are pumping more oil, and it means that you are depressing the price. When there is more oil in the market, like any other commodity, the price of that commodity will go down. And when the price goes down, it doesn't go down for the Kuwaitis only, but for all those who are selling the oil. Early on, in May, or in April, then in May, then in June, then in July, Iraq owned Kuwait as well as the United Arab Emirates. That's what they are doing is unacceptable. That is producing more oil than they need and depressing the price. What they are doing was unacceptable from Iraq's point of view, was intolerable. And Iraq called this as economic warfare. That is not different from any military warfare. Having not responded to these pleas, Iraq surprised the world and invaded Kuwait, which I must say was really a catastrophe for Kuwait, for Iraq and the Arab world.
I invite you, if you're able at this time and feel comfortable, to either link arms or join hands as I read through the pledge. The United States has contributed to the mounting crisis in the Persian Gulf with the most massive military buildup since the war in Vietnam. This course of action may lead to a major war, a permanent U.S. military presence in the region, or both. This effort, which is costing the United States $1 billion per month, comes at the expense of social programs here at home and ends the hopes for a peace dividend. I pledge to resist the United States military actions in the Middle East by joining with others in acts of nonviolent civil disobedience as conscience leads me.
We know the facts are there. Mathematically, we know that if we're going to have an economy so dependent on oil, the Middle East is where it's going to come from. The U.S. consumes 25% of the world's oil. We hold in this country 4% of the oil resources. So if it's going to be oil, it's not going to be a domestic energy policy.
The modern family is abandoning the language of consumerism in favor of the discourse of war. Prodded by the hurly-burly of recent events, the popularity of terrorism, the shifting and uncertain economy, the growth of patriotism, the aggressive posture of our president, our swelling military arsenal, and the specter of all-out nuclear war, many families look apprehensively to the future.
What has happened is that we have had an economy and a lifestyle built up on the use of petroleum as a fuel, coupled with a tremendous surge of industrial development based on petrochemicals. When you think about plastics, nylon, Dacron, and all those plastics from DuPont, Monsanto, and so on, all these are based on oil. And furthermore, in addition to the plastics industry, there is a huge multi-billion-dollar agricultural interest that is developing pesticides, fertilizers, herbicides, and so on, not to mention detergents and cleaners and cleaning fluids. All these products are virtually all of them are petroleum based. So when I say we're addicted to it, our entire society, including the clothes we wear, the furniture, the furnishings, the curtains and sheets and wash and wear, and so a lot of this stuff is also petrochemical based.
So the technologies are there. There are wind farms out there generating electricity on a commercial scale. And the barriers are simply that the room for these technologies is not being made in the marketplace, and we have a marketplace that's favoring and subsidizing and emphasizing fossil fuels and nuclear power. And there is no future in those fuels, no ecologically sustainable future, no future of real energy security, and yet that's what we're seeing proposed.
Dave, Sky King, over. Sky King, come back. Dave, Sky King, Masco Security is aware of your presence, over.
What are you guys doing?
We're protecting the earth symbolically from our country's addiction to oil, and I myself am just very upset of the images of all the animals dying in Alaska, and I just want the government and industry to offer us some clean energy alternatives, and that's why I'm here.
We have to move away from this addiction because it's extremely costly in terms of pollution, air pollution, pesticides, toxic waste, PCBs in our waterways, for example. We have to move away from that pollution because it is destroying the existence of life in this country.
We're gonna beat back that oil attack! We're gonna beat back oil attack! We're gonna beat back that oil attack! We're gonna beat back!
If the true cost of oil, if the environmental cost of oil, the air pollution, the oil spills, the cost of protecting our oil supplies in the Middle East, the cost of 500,000 American troops in the Persian Gulf, if those were factored into the price of oil, we'd be buying oil at close to $100 a barrel, not what we were until recently, $20 to $25 a barrel.
There's all kinds of things people could do and have done, but I mean, things have happened, like, you know, when in the early 70s, when we had some impetus towards finding alternative energy sources. Within a few years, 80 to 90% of the alternative energy research groups and projects have been bought up by the U.S. oil companies. I mean, but it's hard to fight that sort of thing. The only way that it's going to be fought is unfortunately, it looks like the way it's going, we're going to end up in a war in the Middle East, and a lot of people are going to die, and ultimately, people in this country are going to get fed up with that, and then possibly they might elect somebody who gives a damn about those sorts of things, and we might get something done.
Any kind of research into biomass and alternative fuels and ecological energy production has been slashed. Renewable energy budget was cut by 90% over the last decade. Transit funding that would provide an alternative to car use cut by 1/2 over the last decade. So these kinds of choices, I think, have landed us in the Gulf. The other big misplaced priority at the Department of Energy is their whole weapons program. They spend 60% of every dollar over at DOE producing, testing, developing nuclear weapons.
One reason this country or this administration does not subsidize windmills is that you can't make war with windmills. You see, you subsidize the nuclear industry not to shore up an aging nuclear reactor. You subsidize it because the byproduct of Indian Point or Shoreham that Lilko's now talking about wanting to crank up again, not that it's ever produced any electricity to speak of. The byproduct of that is plutonium. Now, plutonium is one of the most deadly substances known to humankind, and yet it's used in making more and more nuclear bombs.
In September, after the mobilization of troops to the Gulf had already happened, over 100,000 American troops were there. The Senate, the U.S. Senate, was considering a bill to improve fuel efficiency of U.S. automobiles. Well, the car makers and the Bush administration got down in the trenches in tandem and lobbied against that thing and succeeded in defeating it. And these senators went home, and they haven't suffered a bit from that. And what they ought to have done is taken a pounding in every state in the Union when they went back, and people should be saying to them, you know, doggone it, how did you vote when the question was, are we going to have more fuel-efficient cars or not? Are we going to stop wasting gasoline in this country? And they're basically getting away with it. People either aren't informed or aren't active about it. There isn't enough local pressure. I think there is some, but not enough so that politicians on the federal level and on the state level can get away with basically bowing to the pressures of automakers and oil companies and coal and nuclear and all the rest. If that could change, we'd begin to see some changes.
You're on.
Did you ever wonder how your federal tax dollar is spent? In 1989, 21 cents of your tax dollar was split between education, health and human services, and the Labor Department. 8 cents went towards affordable housing and protecting the environment. And while thousands of Americans lacked affordable health care, were homeless and hungry, 61 cents of your 1989 federal tax dollar was spent on the military. Is this how you want your money spent? This year you have a choice. Through the Alternative Revenue Service, individuals across the country are using the Easy Peace form to turn their tax dollars from war to peace. Join a tax revolt for the 90s. Call for your Easy Peace form today. 1-800-955-PEACE.
Who anointed us to be the super cop of the universe? Blood and oil don't mix. Blood and oil don't mix.
Get the troops out now and bring the war home. Join a week of actions in Washington, starting with a national demonstration on January 19th and winding up with a national demonstration on January 26th.